Good evening. Welcome everybody to this special workshop session of the Council of the Town of Oakville. We have regrets from Councillor Farmer, who's on maternity leave, and from Councillor Grant, and I believe from Councillor Duddick?
And Robertson.
And Robertson. Thank you.
They're at the Santa Claus parade.
It's perhaps they're at the next seating.
Next seating.
Or sitting, or whatever they call it.
Second sitting.
Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, we have none. This evening, we're meeting to receive information from staff and to receive delegations from the public on possible items to submit to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. And so this is the Community Culture and Recreation Stream application workshop. And I have 4 listed delegations, but if council will permit, I thought we should poll the audience to see if there are any others who wish to delegate. And so let me take that on consent. Does anyone object to that? No one objects, so by your consent, I'll be polling after the listed delegations to see if anybody else wants to delegate. I'm looking at you, Mr. Harris. All right. So the very next thing that we need to consider is, will it make any difference to the delegations if they hear the rules from staff before they make their pitch? Or would you like to make your pitch no matter what the rules are? I'm gonna take that for you're all determined and you want to make your pitch. So therefore, Madam Clerk, would you call the listed delegation?
Yes, the first delegation is Shelley Gronsky, Board Chair on behalf of the Oakville Gymnastics Club.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight on to identify community. My understanding of the workshop tonight is to identify community, culture, and recreational projects to be considered against the federal provincial criteria for funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, so the ICIP. I am Shelley Gronsky, as I was introduced, and I'm the president of the Oakville Gymnastics Club and also chair of the board. And just as a way of introduction of OGC, OGC currently supports over 6,000 athletes across 4 different disciplines of gymnastics. We have women's artistic, we have men's artistic, we have acro, and we have tumbling. It's one of the few gymnastics clubs, probably in the province, that can support all 4 disciplines of gymnastics. We have athletes that compete, obviously, we have a number of recreational athletes because gymnastics is a fabulous foundation for all sports, no matter what discipline of sport you decide to participate in life. But it's also, we have competitive athletes that participate both provincially, nationally, and globally. And we actually have 11 teams of our acro delegation that will be going to Mexico as part of the Pan Am Games at the end of the month in November. So we have a long, proud history of our athletes. I also want to share, just in terms of background, that I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but the current facility for OGC was a result of a partnership between the town of Oakville and the Oakville Gymnastics Club. We entered into a partnership agreement in 2008, and it was a 20-year agreement based on a loan repayment. And we are extremely proud that our ability to repay the loan was actually accomplished in 10 years. So we accelerated the loan payment by 10 years. So over the years, the demand for recreational competitive gymnastics has experienced significant growth. And we really outgrew our facility many years ago. And so it's been on our radar to find that second facility. And when we identified the need for a second facility, our go-to option was to come to the town and start working on another partnership opportunity. And based on that, it was, okay, let's explore opportunities up at Nagawa. And for all the years that I've been on the board at OGC and a member of OGC, we've heard at our AGM, we're exploring a second facility up at Neagawa. And the timelines have drawn on, and we couldn't wait anymore. Over the years, we even went to the town, and we were actually a serious contender for the old Oakville arena. We were exploring the opportunity to retrofit the arena into a new gymnastics club and a second facility for OGC. At the end of the day, the constituents of the town decided that they were going to keep it as an arena. So unfortunately, we didn't get to work on that project together. And again, we were on another search for a second facility. We've since rented a satellite facility on North Service Road, but we know that's only temporary. And we're really excited really about this ICIP opportunity, because it almost feels like there's the opportunity to win the lottery, because the timing is perfect really for us. And we do see it as an opportunity to have that second home for OGC. We would like to ask the city whether or not there is a building potentially available that we could renovate into a gymnastics facility. So that is our ask tonight, to understand if that is an option, or if there are any existing buildings that we could work together and create. And if we were able to identify a building, we could create a project, and I believe it would fit underneath the second ICIP category, which is the rehabilitation and renovation category. And the renovation projects, I think the spend on that category is less than $5 million. And we do believe that retrofitting existing town buildings would be able to fall within underneath that category. I understand that your project's approval meeting is November 5th. So we would be very interested in exploring and working with the town to understand if there are existing buildings, and if there were existing buildings that we could entertain a renovation, what that could look like, and start to narrow down the options and costing. So with that, I can take your questions.
Councillor Adams.
Thanks so much for the presentation and joining us. Why are you set on a renovation as opposed to a new build?
Category 2.
Why set on a renovation as opposed to a new build?
Yeah, why are you targeting renovation specifically? Why is the club not gone to we want to do a new build? You know, a dedicated building or a dedicated space also.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would be open to either, to be honest. But the recent discussions when we've looked at new facilities has been about partnership. And so when Neagawa it's been in talks with the school board and the town about how do we have a shared facility that, you know, there's infrastructure around it that supports the OGC. And then even with the, when we were exploring the town of Oakville's arena, it was how do we renovate that? I mean, I think part of it also is an accelerated timeline, hoping that a renovation would not take as long as a brand new build. And so that, you know, our current lease is up in a couple of years. So it would be nice to obviously be able to do a renovation on an existing facility that would be able to see hopefully a line of sight sooner.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. You're looking at existing facilities. Is there anything that you focused on, knowing the inventory within the town facilities that you're looking at for making it possible for the gymnastics club?
No, sorry, I'm not aware at this point in time of the existing inventory that might be considered. But we are very much just based on our history of partnership with the town and the opportunity to potentially see this as something, if you are looking at assets to potentially find other uses for it, we would be very interested in exploring that.
Would you, if going down the line, would you be exploring another partnership relationship with the town? You have an existing partnership relationship now with the town.
Yes.
Because you're on it in the town facility, I believe.
Yeah, Glen Abbey.
Glen Abbey, thank you. Would that be looking at the same type of template relationship?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And right now, the gymnastics club, is there availability for general programs for the public that are outside the gymnastics club or being contracted by the town? Does the town contract any of the gymnastics programs?
No, all the programming currently is overseen by the OGC.
So in essence, you're really looking at as a facility, not any program sharing down the line. It's basically facility renovation of a facility.
I mean, I would never say never, to be honest, like honestly, because, I mean, I do believe that gymnastics is foundation for all sport and athleticism. I have kids that are in multiple sports in the city of Oakville, lacrosse, hockey, gymnastics, and soccer actually as well. And all of the coaches always say that it's the gymnastics that's given them the foundation. So I think, as we look for a secondary facility, if there's other opportunities for programming to meet other needs in the town and there's partnership opportunities on programming, I don't see why we would say no.
Okay. And my last question on the report, there's about 6 or 7 demonstrations. Could you meet these requirements on the demonstrations? The first one is demonstrated organizational capacity to implement the project, demonstrate ongoing financing to manage operating pressures without creating operating or capital cost pressures, and it goes on and on. Have you think your organization can meet those requirements?
Yes, at this point in time, we actually think based on the funding of the program that we would actually, based on the cost we currently incur for our secondary satellite facility, it would actually cost us less if we were to be able to find a secondary facility to do this renovation.
So I would assume that coming into a relationship or partnership, you're bringing $1 to the table?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Sanju.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Thank you, Ms. Kansky. I appreciate your presentation. 2 questions, specifically around actually the second piece in the technical criteria that Councillor Chisholm was just mentioning. So around funding needs for the proposed project, do you find that your user fees are established and enough for what you have currently?
Yes, so typically OGC does operate in despite we're a not-for-profit, we do typically have a surplus every year, and we have a fairly solid set of savings in the bank. And this has been planned because over the years we have anticipated another build or another facility for OGC, so so financially we're in good standing.
And then you mentioned that there is an ongoing increase in usership. Do you have the numbers for usership now and what you anticipate in the future?
Can you get that to us?
We certainly could get it to you. So, I mean, right now, we have approximately 6,000 total athletes, about 3,500, that breaks across 3,500 members. We have about 300 competitive athletes across the 4 disciplines. In terms of what the forecast would be on the membership, I think we would need to look at the footprint of what a new facility would look like because that drives the programming. So right now, our satellite facility on the North Service Road is only acro because acro just needs basically an open facility with mats and high ceilings, and the acro teams can do what they want. If we have the opportunity to have a facility that could have more of the equipment like OGC today at Glen Abbey, then we can get into and expand the programming in a second facility, and that would allow us to drive numbers. We have a significant number of wait lists consistently that we can't fill, and those wait lists are both on the recreational and competitive side.
Thank you so much.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. So, just so I'm clear, the first stage is really that the town find something for you so that we can put this application together, because in order to apply for the rehabilitation and renovation, there has to be something to rehab and to renovate. So, so we still need to do some legwork to find, even if it's possible for you to apply. Okay. Then the second thing is, one of the criteria touches on an MOU for joint projects or partnerships. Are there other organizations in the town that you've reached out to or that you would be considering working together with, so it's not a sole gymnastics endeavor?
I would say that we haven't specifically up until this point in time, but I think similar to Mr. Councillor Chisholm's feedback on opportunities for additional programming with the town, I think we would be open to collaborations with other sports, or other organizations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Elmer.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming out. And I'm surprised Hussey's not here too.
He would be here. Unfortunately, he's on vacation this week. So
okay.
I got the call to say, can you go?
Okay.
So hence I'm here.
What's the number on the wait list currently?
On the wait list, we probably have, I think, at least a couple of hundred kids every session on the wait list.
So, from where they're from, are they all 100% from Oakville, or what's the percentage from Oakville that are residents?
Yeah, for our recreational programs, we have a stipulation in our bylaws that 95% of the athletes have to be from Oakville. And in the competitive program, it's 75%, and we are currently meeting those targets.
So, athletes is 95?
So recreational athletes, so
Yeah, okay,
is 95% based out of Oakville.
Right.
And for competitive athletes, we have a stipulation that 75% of our competitive athletes have to be from Oakville.
Got it. Thank you.
You're
Thanks very
welcome.
much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gonski.
Welcome, thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Next delegate is Stefan Zadrovic.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening. Just wondering if it's possible to pull up the PowerPoint. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I just threw this together yesterday afternoon. I was talking to Councillor Sandu, and I guess a picture is worth 1,000 words. So since I only have 10 minutes, this may help. I'm a resident of North Oakville. I live in Glenorchy with my wife and our 2 children, 13 and 14. What I want to speak to this evening is really about an opportunity. So first I should say that, in my opinion, staff at the city, the urban designers, urban planners have done a fantastic job. I think anybody who's visited Oakville, lives in Oakville, agrees that our facilities, the way our town is planned in terms of parks and trails, second to none. So kudos to staff. That said, there are always opportunities, and that's what I wanted to talk about this evening. I live in the, just to give you a bit of grounding where I live and the park I wish to speak about. Isaac Park is a community park on the northwest quadrant of basically Dundas and 6th Line. It was built around 2015, and it's adjacent to St. Gregory the Great Elementary School. It's been open, I believe, 3 years. Now, there are other parks, nearby parks, and I wanted to give you a frame of reference where they are, and then also the distance. And I'll speak a bit to what the other parks offer in comparison to Isaac. So, if you go a little bit west, you have George Savage Park, which is adjacent to Oranawi Elementary School. That's about 1.5 kilometers away from Isaac Park. And you have a park soon to be built, I believe next year at some point, hopefully, is at William Rose Park, but it's on the other side of 6th Line, which is quite it's a busy road right now, and I can imagine it's going to be much busier as development continues. And that is 1 kilometer away from Isaac Park. George Savage, the amenities of George Savage are many. You have the playground for young children, you have a half-court basketball court, skateboard ramp, tennis courts, baseball diamond. Phenomenal setup. And it's very well utilized. You go there on a Sunday afternoon and it's just full of kids and adults playing. It's a park that is truly has something to offer all ages. Now this is Isaac Park, and I live about 2 streets in. This park is very large, but it is really limited in its offering. It has a playground for very young children, small splash pad, so basically 10 and under. And then it has 2 soccer fields, and that's it. So we do have a lot of children in the neighborhood that are older than 10, so it's that 10 and to teen. I've noticed this summer that as long as they're kept occupied with an outlet for their energy, they're not riding around the neighborhood on bikes causing trouble. And this park really is missing that piece. So if you're above 10, there isn't very much for you to do here, except if you have a whole soccer team to play with. So I just see this as an opportunity. Where I've put the little star there, there's an opportunity there to add an extra amenity that would be something that could be used by all ages. And that would be a basketball court, basketball pad. It would make a perfect opportunity for the entire neighborhood. I know my son and daughter both play basketball. They play for Oakville Venom. And they're out every day playing. And instead of having them go a kilometer and a half away to Otonawi, I know there are tons of other kids in this immediate neighborhood that you could go on any given evening in the summer and see a game of 4-on-4 or 5-on-5. So demand is there. So this is a picture. I just took a street shot of the current park. So this is that parquet, traditional parquet that caters to, if you will, Canada. This is a picture of the area where I think, the trees have been planted, and so we're not going to move the trees. However, there's this open section just south of the splash pad that kind of just, it's screaming for something extra. And so this is where I propose there may be an opportunity for consideration. I used to live in West Oak Trails, Castlebrook and Pine Glen, and that park is very, very well utilized, and one of the main features is this basketball court. So you can just imagine for $50,000 or whatever it is, we can convert this space into this. And it's something, especially now with the Raptors having won last year, it's one of the fastest, it already was one of the fastest growing sports in Canada, and now it's just exploded. So imagine if the next Jamal Murray or, comes from Oakville, because we provided the facilities for kids to develop and play competitively. And we also don't want them playing on the street. And the reality now is the yards are so small in that neighborhood, no one's going to put a basketball pad in their backyard, and the driveways are tight as well, so they end up going on the street. And so you have kids playing on the street, which presents hazards in itself. That's it, so short and sweet. Any questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Councillor Chisholm will start off with questions for you.
Thank you, Worship. I gather you're looking for a full court basketball court? It doesn't matter?
Whatever fits. Right?
Okay, so I guess that's the question with the size of the property and adjacent from homes. It could be a challenge with, the bouncing of the ball and so forth, and a noise factor. But again, with basketball the way it's going, full court doesn't seem to be the primary anymore. It's usually half court, playing 3-on-3. And also there's children who are playing basketball at a younger age, and the height of the court, the basketball nets are not equipped for younger children. So an adaptation of maybe a half court with a sliding that would something would be suffice?
Excellent idea. However, you can make it more universal appeal.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sandu?
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Thank you, Mr. Senator. That was very, very beneficial and very informative. Right now, I think that the way that we're helping to kind of manage flow in the town is those things that you mentioned. So people are playing on the street. A lot of folks in North Oakville are going to different places like Our Lady of Peace. But not everybody has access to a bike, and maybe kids are too small to be able, or to actually be able to ride across intersections to be able to get to things. And right now we don't have a rec facility that we would be able to use internally. So I think over the summer, so Councillor Chisholm mentioned, people being concerned about the time and the usage and bouncing basketballs and things like that with the close by homes. I think the summer would probably be the most utilized time, because that's the time when children are going to actually be home, and the sun sets at a certain time. So we're thinking about 9 o'clock. I don't think we'll be outside of that window. But I guess the question that I have for you is, if we're thinking about other facilities and other things that we can use this basketball facility for, what are the other things that come to mind to you? So I'm thinking about, we already have at Isaac Park, we already have one of those things where people can, drop a ball into and it shoots out 4 different ways. What other things can a blacktop be used for in that area?
Again, you're limited by the size of the blacktop, I guess, but really, I think if you want to keep it safe, you probably wouldn't use that it's already not going to be a huge court to begin with. So you probably wouldn't want to multi-purpose that court because you would get into situations where someone wants to play hopscotch or whatever, and then someone else comes the ball, and so I don't know if you'd be able to necessarily practically implement multiple uses out of that small pad.
I think that if we have the space, then the full court makes more sense, because then we would have the ability to multi-purpose, and that would kind of fit more in this structure.
And we have tons, like, you could easily have 2 games of 3-on-3 at the same time. There are so many kids playing basketball in that neighborhood right now. It's incredible.
No, I totally agree. Thank you.
Councillor Lischina.
Thank you. This just sparked a question about the distance to the road. Would you need a fence on that side to make sure that the balls aren't?
I can't say for certain. I don't think so, because if you compare it to the proximity of the basketball court at Castlebrook Park, it's probably roughly the same. And Castlebrook is adjacent to Pine Glen, which is a very busy road. And this would be, ISIC would be a very secondary road. So I guess the traffic is far less. So it's something I guess you would have to verify, but I don't think it would be an issue.
Councillor Haslett-Seal.
This is a question for staff. Can I?
You can do anything you want.
Okay. Commissioner Bell, can you just give us a sense of, there's constantly sort of evolutions to the parks that exist. Has a basketball court been considered for this park or within its vicinity, either currently or in the next few years?
A basketball court was not considered for this park because there is a basketball court at the St. Gregory's. So one of the challenges that the school is having, as we've spoken to them, is the fact that there's been a lot of complaints about noise in the summertime, so the nets were removed. They have reassured us that the nets are going back soon. And
My kids go there.
Yeah.
They have a very low tolerance, sorry.
Yeah, it's a major issue. I mean, personally, I'm a huge basketball fan. I think it's absolutely brilliant that so many kids are now excited and interested in playing basketball. But one of the challenges we have is placing the courts in an area that we will not get a lot of noise complaints from residents. So it's something that we're trying to work through. And certainly we're happy to work with residents around that.
If I can add just an observation. That court is tucked behind the school. So it's tucked behind the garbage building, it's tucked behind the school, so you're really out of sight. And so I would say if you're in a more visible spot, you're probably not going to have a lot of the issues that you have there, kids hanging out, whatnot, because it screams as, a sheltered area. And yeah, so I think having it out in the open, and it doesn't have to be in that corner. That park is huge, so I'm sure there are perhaps other options that are not even considered.
Councillor Sandu.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Actually, just a comment to Commissioner Bell. There was an issue, a similar issue in the city of Toronto not too long ago, I think right around the Raptors pinning time, where there was a Toronto facility that also had their basketball rings taken down because of noise complaints. Can we look into that a little bit? This is just kind of like a takeaway. Can we look into that to see how we can help manage this for our residents in the community? Because it's just something that would be such a boon, I think, for the town. And I know that Toronto ended up putting up their basketball courts again, but they were municipal courts. So maybe we can have that discussion with the school board?
Absolutely.
And one more comment. The park at George Savage has that half-court basketball, but it also has, I believe, 6 or 7 baskets as well at the school right next. So there is that duplicity, if you will, there. And it's actually better positioned because it's not sheltered, it's open, it's right next to the baseball diamond. So.
Councillor Chisholm.
I think we're getting to a point in the agenda where we're planning this little facility. Just one other comment is that the noise is an issue, and in my years of experience, when we looked at the skateboard park out in Shell Park, was another challenge. Berming, plant materials and so forth have buffered the noise to some extent, but I think that's going to be the real issue. But if there is a consideration for a basketball full court, it has an opportunity to have ice on it in the wintertime, or if you go to a half court, but I would also look at the berming of that area to dampen the noise. So we're into planning here. I think I'll just stop there. Your worship, thank you.
Well played, sir, well played. Councillor Longo.
Just a, there we go. Commissioner Bell, just a quick question for multi-purpose. Growing up in Montreal, we used to have basketball courts, tennis courts, then convert them into ice rinks. So is there a way to potentially, if you build a court like that, even though we don't have as long a winter, is there a way of maybe putting boards around that to then you can play street hockey in a contained area rather than being on the streets and knowing what Ward 7's like? I don't know if it's not the best place to be playing street hockey, but is there a way of converting kind of summer basketball and then kind of fall, winter into street hockey or something similar?
We do have, we do have examples of that, and that is becoming increasingly more popular right across southern Ontario. Everyone's favorite amenity is an outdoor skating rink.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir, for sparking such a conversation.
Thank you for your time.
And for
I
your
won't be able to be
information.
here on the 5th. I'm traveling for work, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next delegation.
The next delegation is Zane Koch on behalf of the Oakville Cricket Club.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is Zain. I'm the president of Oakville Cricket Club.
They can hear you better.
Oh.
Here. We'll put this on and also this far away is better.
Thank you. So, as many of you know me because I'm here since 2005, actually. We have been looking, I'll just make it short for all of you. We are looking for a cricket field since 2005, and what we have now at Glen Ashton is a half-size cricket field. And since then, it is the fact is how in between what happened since 2005 and now, we have all the documented. We have all documented here, and we have given a copy to the town clerk, and she will distribute to you. I'm a little late in sending you before, but you'll get that. From that time till now, it is the fact is quite established. Mr. Mayor had personally guaranteed us, and we had several meetings with Tom Adams and Natalia and Chris Mark since quite long. The fact establishes that Oakville needs a regular size cricket field. Now we took this opportunity to come here, like the lady said, it's like a lottery, hoping that this process will be expedited by this grant or this federal funding, we call it. That is the whole purpose of coming. So if anyone has any question, I'm willing to answer.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll start down at the end. Is that you, Councillor Chisholm?
Yes, Your Worship. Right now, a cricket field requires what? About 5 or hectares, or what is the size of a cricket field? Or 5 acres?
What we are looking for, I'll not go into details what actually is the cricket field size, because 65 meters from the center in the circumference. But what we are looking for is exactly just a little bit bigger than a soccer field. That's the size. And that the place and the venue for this field has been established since 2008, which is North Park.
So the question has to be asked, if you don't mind, Your Worship, through you to Colleen, is this not in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan with respect to a cricket field?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's both in the Parks, Recreation and Library Master Plan, and it's been identified as a key need, and we also have it planned specifically for North Park. Originally, when we did the plan, it was not in there, but we've since adjusted it so that it will be.
And what is the time frame with respect to that development of a cricket field?
We were looking at 2021. Ideally, what we would like to do is complete all the fields at North Park, which might be an interesting project.
Thank you.
Next, on this side, any councillor Hasworth-Hill?
Can you just give us an idea of the number of participants? How many people play cricket and how many people are on a wait list to want to play because of the demand?
Appreciate that question, because this is the main question when it comes to cricket field. As you guys must appreciate, this is a growing sport, and as they say, you build it, they come. We have been turning down people. First of all, let me give you the numbers. We started with 12 people in 2004, and it grew and grew, and now we have over 265 people who want to play cricket in Oakville, and majority of them, like 75% of them, belong to Oakville. So this number is growing, but as you say, cricket is still a little bit different sport than other sports, because you have to have a cricket field, then the people will come, and the number which people are playing in parks and small areas, as Jimmy would say, it is more than 500 people.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Elder.
Thank you, Member Burton. I guess my question was going to be the number of people, so it's only 265 right now?
Active people, but there are over 500 people who want cricket fields, who can start participating in the game. See, Glen Ashton Park, I'll tell you, if you see the numbers from the town clerk, or booking facilities, it is totally booked right from the very first day. It is allowed to till the end of the summer. So the revenue generated by town for this Glen Ashton, which is half-size cricket field, is over 8,000 this year. It is fully booked right from 7 o'clock until 7 p.m.
So we've got only 265 players, but it's booked 100%?
Yeah. Because it's only on weekends.
Oh.
Yes, the game is sports is playing only on the weekends.
Okay, so during 5 days of the week, there's nothing happening on a cricket field?
Happening there.
Which is quite different from a soccer field and everything else.
Exactly.
So why is that? Like now you got me really interested.
See, in days to come, like Hamilton is building a world-class cricket facility, Centennial Park, as you might have heard, because the Olympic is next Olympic, the cricket is going to be included in that. So that stadium itself is huge. Now, when you have a facility for the lights and everything, the cricket will be played in 3 hours, from 7 to 10 p.m. There's very good chance in the future that it's already started, because a 3-hour cricket is already playing around. It's there.
So my question is, okay, so we say, okay, you're going to get your cricket field, but you're only going to use it 2 days a week. Who else can use it for something else? Can the soccer club use it?
Yeah, the original plan, if you see in towns, this thing was a soccer field in the middle, cricket pitch in the middle of 2 soccer fields at North Park.
So, and that works, that'll work just fine? The
That
soccer
will
club
work just
can
fine,
use it
because
for
it
5
can work
days?
everywhere in GTA. It's like there are 15 or 20 cricket fields right in the middle of 2 soccer fields in GTA. Brampton, Mississauga, Toronto, of course, Etobicoke.
So what, two soccer fields?
Yeah, it's
And
just
one cricket field, that's what you're saying?
between 2 soccer fields, 1 cricket field.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Longo?
Thanks, Mayor Burton. So, is this a sport that can be played indoors at all, or does it have to be open air? Arena cricket, I'm just asking.
Sorry to interject, guys. I'm the Vice President, Monty Khan, to help out. Just to, first of all, I'm going to answer your question there. Cricket can be played indoors and outdoors. We actually have lots of leagues now for indoor cricket, which are turned around from baseball parks. There people play baseball indoors, now used as cricket fields as well. But it's a totally different game that you're playing indoors than outdoors. The indoor cricket fields, there are people using their kids for, training. They're coming up with the Team Canada all the way down to grassroots level, trying to develop the sport from Cricket Canada all the way down to grassroots in every single jurisdiction. Coming back to the Brampton question with the cricket fields, they actually are mandated for every 2 soccer fields there will be a cricket field in the middle. That's part of their bylaw. Now that I think it was 2 years ago that they came up with that. Playing the game outdoors is basically, the whole reason behind it. We get 4 months of cricket, like a lot of outdoor sports, and you're trying to make the most of it. And the National Ground right now is something that we've tried to use more as a youth facility to get the youth going, because we do have youth programs going on there. To answer the question about the evenings, we are running youth programs and training time, practice times from Tuesday all the way to Friday, so they are booked 6 to 9, and I'm sure the city clerks can answer that, but we are technically going from Tuesdays right to Sunday. I think Monday is the only time where we don't use it, but I live in the area and I see kids playing there with their parents, and it's amazing to see, non-structured cricket being playing on the field.
So you would be open to a multi-use facility potentially, that potentially could be indoor, you could play cricket, or outdoors, you'd be open
If you're talking about a bubble type of facility, I think that would be a great idea, where you could then generate revenue. If I can tell the Oakville Cricket Club, if you could play year-round, you'd be seeing 100, 200 more people at it and jumping in on that. It would be probably the first community to do that, because I think right now maybe just one facility that has an indoor full cricket ground where it can be played in a full scale. So that'd be great.
I still have my cricket, the first sport I played was cricket, so I still have my bat and ball. So
excellent.
There you go.
Welcome
Can't say I was very good at it though.
Next year.
They'll welcome you to the game.
Yeah.
266
Well, the mayor was there, I'm sure.
There you go.
Councillor Sandu.
Thank you, Mayor Britton. Just a couple of questions, gentlemen. Thank you for your presentation and the information. I realize that this has been a need and an ongoing need in Oakville for a very, very long time. We appreciate the context and continuing conversation, I think, with every councillor here. I think you guys have done a very good job at advocating for yourselves. 2 questions, really. We talk about local areas or current park facilities. So are there other municipalities in Halton that currently have a cricket field? Like Middleton, Burlington, do you know?
Burlington for sure. They use the Trillium Fund to generate funds with the city of Burlington to create the field, the pitch that they have there now, and it's actually it's a full-size cricket field with 2 baseball fields on either end.
Interesting. So that's another multi-use option.
So it's a multi-use with baseball fields as well. And then Milton, I know they've tried to build a new facility there as well. There's a facility we were talking to Mississauga, Town of Mississauga. Dr. Lachino was on, I think, in that meeting where we try to do a facility where we can share the facility with Mississauga, just on the border of, I think, Burnhamthorpe and 9th Line, I believe. The interest is there. We just, need to make sure we can carry through the process. And one of the interesting things with this grant, I felt was the North Park facility does have a mandate of time and, being able to have it come through at a certain time. But would that be something that we could hasten the process of using the extra funding, potential funding from federal and provincial help, rather than keeping it all on the municipal heads?
Just to add to answer to your question, yes, every city or town, suburb or anywhere else in GTA has multiple cricket fields. Brampton has 15, I think. Toronto has over 15. Mississauga has 7 cricket fields, designated cricket-only fields. So it's just in the area, in the whole, from Niagara until Brantford, Cambridge, London. It's just Oakville that doesn't have a full cricket pitch.
And the current cricket pitch that we have at Glen Ashton right now, what exactly is lacking in that facility? Is there something that's
Glen
detrimental to your
Ashton,
play?
we have been describing what problems we face there for our like very pronouncedly last 5 years. Natalia and Mr. Tom Adams, they both know.
I see them nodding their heads.
Yeah, there are at least 10 problems we face at Glen Ashton itself.
The town has helped immensely to
Yeah.
try to keep it up for us, and we appreciate that. But in the end, when the league doesn't want to run finals or playoffs in your field because it potentially is a danger to, and not an adequate field, it's kind of a shot on the arm for us.
I see.
Right, so that's what we're trying to improve, right? And increasing the level of play obviously comes with a good field as well. So.
No, and few cricket clubs, they refuse to play, even the league games. They just said, okay, we forfeit the game because it's not safe to play and it's very short and it spoils our cricket. And this happened in a year. We went to playoff every year almost, and we won the trophy that year. And
congratulations.
That's like humiliating in a sense that people just say it's not within the law. Sorry.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that. Mayor Burton, if you would indulge me, I just have a quick question for Commissioner Bell.
You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Bell, quick question just about the North Park plan and the timing. Can you help us understand how that would be, or the timing would be impacted without these funds by Bill 108? Would that impact that timeline in any way?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's quite conceivable that it will have a very negative impact on the schedule. We don't know at this point what the full impact will be. We have been reassured that municipalities will be made whole, but that our definition of made whole is different than others.
This is the famous bill where the minister has promised mayors that municipalities will be made whole, and the same guy has promised developers that there'll be savings for that. So take your pick.
Thank you.
Somebody, I think, is going to be holding a short end of a stick.
A wager, you are correct. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Rob Kent, who's president of the Global Swim Series.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Rob Kent, and I'm actually representing two groups here tonight. The Lake Ontario Swim Team, which many of you are familiar with, which also affectionately goes by Lost or Lost Swimming, and as well as a running group called Connor's Runners. And sorry for my lack of preparation, but I didn't know about this meeting until last night. But that's a good segue into how this came about. We were in, Councillor Hazeltine created, I believe, a process where stakeholders that use the lake itself are now included in how the development of the lake shore is actually done. With all the new developments along the lake, including Edgemere and Tannery Park and Waterworks Park, and now Gerlach Gardens, and there's a few more coming too. So we weren't included in those initially, and now we are part of the process, and we've consulted with town and the various components to add input on how it can be used for swimming, for kayaking, for stand-up paddleboard, what have you. So we were at that meeting last night and bumped into Chris Mark from Parks and Open Space, and he told me about this meeting, and that's leads me into what Lost and Connor's Runners are looking for. So we've been involved, and now we're more directly involved in helping consult with the waterfront development with the town. And we just successfully did that with Gerlach Gardens, so it's now just a little more inclusive for various uses for, like I say, entrance and exit from the water. So that's the roundabout way of coming up with the two things that we'd like to propose. One is at the place where law swimming takes place, which is right by the Navy Street Pier in Lakeside Park. And that happens to be, many of us have swum everywhere from Mississauga to Port Dalhousie and all the places in between, and even into the beaches in Toronto. And as it turns out, one of the best places to swim in Lake Ontario is right at the Navy Street Pier. Just the way the water turns over there, and it's kept very clean because it circulates quite well there, and it's not a sheltered bay or anything. The only downside to the area there is that it's hard to get in and out of, just because of the rocks and everything there. So we've been working with the town over the last several years to try and improve that, and we were hoping this would be an opportunity to do that. What we'd like to propose is just that, and there's several different ways. I won't get into all the details of it, but and I do have slide presentation and everything, but didn't have an opportunity to bring it tonight. But there's one proposal is to put in a groin there, and a groin is essentially a little peninsula that sticks out into the lake and creates a sheltered area, which eventually, like if you're, some of you may be familiar with the Burlington Pier, and right in the very corner there's a tiny little, like from here to Mayor Burton, that size of a beach that just naturally occurs. And that's exactly the type of thing that we'd be looking for by creating this. There's also other opportunities to put in, like what is in Coronation Park. There's a small ramp, and this is what we discussed and I believe is being implemented in Gerlach Gardens, a small ramp there that is in kind of the lee of the way the water hits the shoreline. So what we'd like to do is propose that to make it safer to get in and out of the water. The other thing, and this is where we tie in more with Connors Runners, is we are hoping to build a swimming and running facility right by where we swim, for obvious reasons, because you can't really have it elsewhere. And the facility, well, we just built our first facility, which is a 10 by 10 shed. So we're at, I've had this conversation with Councillor Chisholm that we're one of the smaller groups, somewhere between the basketball court and the gymnastics proposal. Not quite 3,000 members, and a little bit more than the basketball, neighborhood basketball court. But we have about 250 members of Law Swimming, and Connors Runners has about 250 members in their group. So between the two of us, about 500 members. And what we're looking for there is just to have a swim run facility, which specifically what that entails is a small, and small I meaning not as big as this room, facility that is right by the tow wharf building, and I've got pictures and everything that we can get into, and many of you have seen them already, that would allow us to have a place to meet, to change, to store things, to have meetings, and hopefully to grow the both programs, because as niche sport as swimming and running are, they're actually as far from niche sports as there is, because the swimming and running are two of the most common sports in the world, and are even very common in Oakville, whether you're part of a group or not. And kind of towards the cricket club's analogy is, say, if you build it, they'll come. Well, we've got 500 members between the two of us with a 10 by 10 garden shed. So if we had proper facilities, we would be able to grow it and offer more programming, and we'd love to include youth programming and all kinds of things, but are really limited by that. But we figure that we've done quite well considering. So, to summarize that, we would like to have some type of structure, whether it's a groin or steps or ramp, and all of which is feasible in the right conditions at Lakeside Park. And we would also like a swim run facility right by the pump house there as well. So that's our two proposals that we'd like to see hopefully fit into this infrastructure program.
Thank you for your information. Councillor Elgar has a question for you.
Thank you for coming. Just with regard to Lost, how many of the members are Oakville residents?
I actually looked that up the other day. It's about, we had 256 members this year. We had about 78% are from Oakville. Now, having said that, you mistakenly labeled me as Global Swim Series, which is only half a mistake because I also represent that. And the Global Swim Series is a series of races that Lost started, and now is 178 races, or 187 races in 37 countries around the world. So given that Lost started that, Lost has actually become very well known around the world, and we get swimmers from, literally this summer we've had swimmers from South Africa, from Ireland, from Australia, several from Australia, New Zealand. The short answer is 78% are from Oakville, but we do get swimmers from all over the world, as well as the GTA.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just looking for a ballpark number. That's good.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
That concludes the listed presenters. Council, we had an indication already from Dave Harris from the Oakville Soccer Club. And Mr. Harris, if you'd like to take the podium, we're happy to hear your information.
Always have to bring it down. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council, for allowing me to speak at the 11th hour. I apologize for not being on the official agenda. My name's Dave Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the Oakville Soccer Club. And just for a little bit of history, we are the largest soccer club in North America. We're boasting about 18,500 registrations over the last year, which works out to approximately 13,000 players. We have two streams, adults and youth. Of the youth stream, we've got competitive in our house league program. The numbers for the players in total are 95% Oakville residents. So we do get some non-Oakville residents playing in our adult league and our youth house league from time to time, Burlington, Mississauga, that sort of thing. We are based out of North Park. No, we're not. We're based out of Pine Glen. Sorry, I'm giving away the ending. So yeah, that's it. So we're based out of the Pine Glen Soccer Center, and it's a 100,000 square foot building that has had a marvelous partnership with the town of Oakville. It's now in its 10th year, so it was 10th anniversary this year. And we run all sorts of programs out of there, from our typical soccer programs right through to other sports organizations coming in and working with us. Currently, I keep saying North Park, the Pine Glen Soccer Facility is at a 95% capacity. What this means is that there is no more room for local community programs to come in and play at our facility. So with that in mind, I would like to provide council with a proposal as a partner with a partnership between the soccer club and the town as part of the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. Our proposal for partnership would see the development of a new soccer facility to be built within the town of Oakville, and preferably at North Park. This proposal would see a similar arrangement to that that's currently in place between the town and OSC for the Pine Glen Soccer Center. What that means is that obviously the money was floated to us by the town, and we take the mortgage payment every month and repay to the town. We've created a business plan which can be submitted to the province as part of this infrastructure program partnership. And we're looking for a way to create a secondary facility that will allow us to welcome other sports organizations, cricket, for example, other organizations within the town of Oakville to be able to play while also enhancing our membership opportunities in the new facility.
Thank you for the most concise pitch I've ever heard in my life. Councillor Elgar.
Dave, thanks for coming, and yeah, I realize you do run quite an operation up there at Pine Glen. I'm interested in what you just said at the very end. You'd like to work with the cricket and the soccer together to try to do something?
Absolutely. We, as part of our business proposal, we've identified a number of people, Halton Field Hockey, we've had some input from cricket, baseball, and that's just not minor, just Little League, the Oakville Angels as well, softball, as well as different other soccer programs. So there's numbers of ways, lacrosse, rugby, there's a number of programs that are desperately looking for indoor field time.
So you're looking, when you talk field, you're talking covered field though, correct?
Similar to the existing field, or the existing facility at Pine Glen.
And that would be, like, my thing is, I guess you need a bigger field.
Oh, no,
with cricket.
We would use the two-star FIFA style pitch that we have, and what you can do is you can either divide it into quarters, halves, or go with a full-size pitch, and it can work for, it's wonderful to see softball in there, because they can actually hit the ball, they can do fielding drills, they can do different things, so it can be customized for whatever sport.
So I guess my question would be now to just the town staff, like the town staff, are they working at this point with like a group of, whether it be it sounds like softball, soccer, and the cricket, to put something together to see what could be done to solve everybody's problem in that area?
Today we have not entertained that idea because we know that other groups have been looking at that. So both the soccer club has been looking at that model, so has the Crusaders.
So how can we get something, is it possible to get something going where we're involved too? Because it's like what happened with the soccer club where they pay their monthly mortgage, I guess. And I'm trying to just think whether we could help out synthesize everything together.
It's something that we could certainly look at, Councillor.
Okay, I thank you. Thanks very much.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, in my old life, that was always an opportunity to look at partnerships and relationships with minor sport organizations under one roof, but the difficulty always has been who's running and who's going to be the boss and who's got a schedule and how much time you get, and that becomes a very complex issue. And the challenge you have with that is that you have disgruntled leases with respect to if you're the number one, who gets priority. So there's a lot of challenge with that, and I can appreciate at the higher level it would make common sense, but when you start getting down to the weeds and working on this, it becomes a challenge. And I'm glad you're still looking at that. With the partnership with the town on the leasing agreement, is that come up due, or are we finished with that payback, or is this?
No, it's a 20-year lease.
So how many years do we have left on that?
10.
10 years? Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Haslett-Dale.
Thank you for coming out, and thank you for all the club does for all the kids in town. So I understand that you take the mortgage payments.
Yep.
In terms of operating costs, all on the Oakville Club?
All on the Oakville Club.
Okay.
With the exception of any damage to or repairs to the HVAC unit, that falls on the town. But all other operating expenses, utilities, everything is us.
Okay. And actually one other follow-up. So how much of the space do you need for the capacity the soccer club is looking for? I certainly admire the sense of partnership and collaboration, and others may want to participate. But for your club alone, what do you anticipate the additional need is?
So future need?
Yeah, and people.
By 2021, I believe we will need 2.1 quarters. So if you picture a square and you cut it in fours, that's how we would cordon off the soccer field or other sports. So the soccer field or the soccer club would need 2.1 of those quarters, with the remainder for outside sports.
Okay, so one more follow-up. And so, because I wasn't on council at the time, what was the loan for, what did the town extend as a loan for the soccer club?
$10 million.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Longo.
Technical difficulties. Thanks, Dave. Is registration increasing? So, I mean, 18,500 registration is great, but is it going up?
It is. We saw a downturn for a little while, but we went up this year 900 youth players. As well, the adult leagues are growing exponentially. So we're seeing that with an older demographic, you're seeing that happen more and more.
So would it take pressure off having to rent a bunch of schools to do training then be more within the club, whatever it ends up being at the secondary facility?
It would, because it would save us from booking school gyms, which aside from being very small, are not always the safest situations for the kids. So to put them back on turf is probably a better idea, and going that way.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dave, for coming. Programming in the daytime, is the soccer club still busy in the daytime?
We are about 43% capacity in off-peak. So that means that we have, for example, we have Nordic pole walking, we have pickup soccer, we have walking soccer, we have a pilot project that's actually, it's not a pilot project, it's into its second year now, through the town of Oakville with the YMCA and with the Halton District School Board, which is called Breaking Barriers 2. And what that is a special needs program where we're teaching high school students how to work with special needs children. So that takes up 2 hours a week. So we're finding new ways to fill the building on the off-peak hours.
Yeah, that's great, because I know that was always the struggle. Everybody in the world wants the 6 to 9 time slot, and nobody wants the 10 a.m. time slot on a Monday. So, and then I guess my other question is, it's not. I don't think there's anybody here who would say that there's not a need for another Pine Glen 2. But I guess the question is the location at North Park. It seems like everybody wants a piece of North Park.
Yes.
That's one of the last ones that we've got sort of going here. Have there been any private partnerships you've explored in terms of land that could be used outside of that North Park area? Or is there any other areas that you guys know of that maybe might not be publicly owned but could be used? I mean, they're talking about $50 million here to build a building. So maybe if there's a piece of land arrangement, I mean, I guess I'm just asking if there are any other options out there than publicly owned land to build this facility on.
Right, I have not seen a specific area that would do for us what North Park would do for us. But again, we have not sort of canvassed the community for other areas that might work for us.
Perfect, thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Sanju?
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Just a quick question. You mentioned that there's other sports that are using the soccer facility now. Do you know percentage-wise how much you're kind of sharing the Pine Glen facility, or what you would see in the future at North Park?
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's 95% capacity, but I would say that we're probably in the area of 25% for non-soccer related sports in that area, give or take. But I can get you the exact number.
And then is that what you anticipate for the North Park facility as well?
We'd like to see a higher number in the North Park facility for other sports, because it would give other sports an opportunity to play within there that aren't getting the opportunity now.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Lischina?
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Just a clarification. So you're asking about North Park where the 2 soccer fields are supposed to be with the cricket in the middle. You're asking for that to be enclosed?
No, we're asking to have a separate facility with the two pitches that are currently there either remaining.
Would be outside.
They would remain outside, and we would have a secondary Pine Glen, for lack of a better explanation, beside them.
And I guess for staff, do we have the space for that?
If we put the building over top of the cricket fields, we do. So you're talking about the existing fields, right? So there's 2 existing fields that are there right now. So what the soccer club is proposing is that the building go over top of those fields.
So that's not including the 2 others?
No.
Okay.
Those are separate.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Noel.
Thank you. I'm sorry, can you clarify that last comment? You said over the 2 cricket fields.
So there are 4.
You said soccer
There's
fields.
4 soccer fields that are going to are contemplated for North Park.
Right.
2 of the fields would also act as a cricket pitch.
Okay.
So that's the multi-purpose side.
Gotcha.
Then there's the other 2 that are existing. So over those 2 existing fields that are there right now, the building would be built over top.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. I just want to explore the capacity issue. You talked about 2.1, you call them quarters?
Quarter fields, yeah.
So that's an aggregate over the course of, what, a 12-hour day, or how's that calculated?
Yeah, basically, if you're looking at your peak hours, we would need 2.1 of the 4 quarters from the 6 p.m. to
You anticipated
midnight.
my next question. So
Yeah.
the 2.1 is aggregated over the peak time, not over the course of a 12-hour day. So the 10 o'clock a.m. that Councillor Sean was mentioning, you're not including that in the calculation?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there'd be capacity of roughly 40-odd% for other activities during peak periods based on your business plan?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
It's an interesting amount of sharing capacity. I just in case there's anybody here who doesn't understand, the original Pine Glen 1 is over a soccer field. We converted an outdoor field into an indoor field. So we got more use out of that field because we took the weather variable out. Councillor Adams, I think you're next.
Thanks very much. I know that we've been talking about Pine Glen 2 for a long time, and I know you've gone through several iterations of different business plans, and I know you've worked with our staff to try to make the business plan a more complete and fully functional business plan. And I know that since our last meeting and today, you've had some discussions with our staff about that. Could you fill us in on your takeaway in terms of the work you've done building partnerships with the other sports organizations? You alluded to the fact that you would like to see the cricket teams coming in and a few of the others, but you actually went and polled for other user groups, relatively speaking, new user groups, and I think you ended up with a fairly substantial number of expressions of interest in terms of if you were the lead tenant, you would have all of these supporting tenants who would be willing to come in and pick up some of that extra 40 to 45% of the extra capacity.
Right. I'll start by saying the town staff, whether it's Colleen or Nancy, has been tremendous in helping me out because they know. I come with questions and they shake their heads sometimes, but I leave with answers, so that's a great thing. I have a 52-page business plan, and in it is approximately 5 pages of commitments, whether they're letterhead or emails, from 15 different groups who have asked to have space in the facility or would be proponents of doing this. I've also got calls out to 8 other groups who I've not yet heard back from that have all said that they would provide either a letter or an email to me. So I think that at the end right now I'm looking at about 23 people or organizations that have said that they would be willing to take on not just once a week, but long-term arrangements to take field time with us.
And so in addition to the soccer club's interest in the matter, there's a whole bunch of other community groups that would have an interest.
Yep.
And in terms of putting together a successful grant bid, those are all probably helpful in terms of being successful going through the whole process.
Absolutely, yeah.
And in terms of the financials, you have the long-term experience of Pine Glen 1 and its financial success in terms of entering into the agreement, working your way through, and we've worked the existing debt down substantially since day one, and you're in a position to be able to partner and take on a second arrangement of a similar state.
Yes.
So similar type, right?
That's correct.
So, and you've had some discussions with our staff about that and
Yep.
the capacity of the business plan that you've talked about to hold that up. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. I wonder if I could ask our staff their opinion of the business plan, and I'm not sure which version you're on in terms of the many iterations that we've had going back a few years now when we've been talking about the different options for Pine Glen 2. But the latest one, and in terms of its ability to meet the criteria that are put forward.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have only had a quick read of the business plan. Dave sent it to me yesterday, so I have read through it. We did meet and talk about the criteria and the things that he would need to demonstrate in order for it to be considered. It's really up to the province, right? It's not up to us. There are a lot of assumptions in the business plan. Typically, the last time what we did was we had our auditors through the consulting side come and review it and give us an opinion on financial affordability and risk. We would want to do the same going forward. That would be our due diligence as staff. But this one, we haven't had an opportunity to do that. It would get submitted on its merits. I suspect there would be follow-up questions from the province wanting further information on existing commitments and affordability. Yeah. But I am speculating.
Okay, fair enough. And then the last question I've got for our staff is, if the project was put forward to ask for grant funding for it, how would the grant funding be applied to the project? If it was a $12 million build, for example.
So 40%, I think it's 40, I'm looking at my numbers again, but 40% federal, then there's the provincial. The share the club would be expected to pay would be the almost 27%.
Okay, and so
So we would have to upfront that, and then we would have to go into a financing agreement for that lease agreement.
All right. And so it would be a situation where in terms of the long-term funding requirement for the new building and for all the tenants, there'd be an ability to have favorable lease arrangements in terms of the cost.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
There would be an opportunity to have favorable costs associated with running the building because you wouldn't have the giant capital.
There would be less financial risk for the club if 67% of it was funded through grants. They would have to pay the remainder. The remainder,
right?
That's right.
And so in terms of all of the various uses, so the soccer club and all of the other smaller partner groups that might take a piece of it, they could all benefit from.
It would depend how they submitted the agreement. So if they had a signed agreement where they're sharing costs, typically what we would do is enter into agreement with the soccer club. They would be responsible for all of the operating costs and then they would then rent space out to their user groups.
Very good, okay. Thank you very much, I appreciate all of that.
Thank you, Councillor. Ladies and gentlemen, is there anyone else with a pitch for the councillor's ears tonight? I'll take that for maybe. Sir, if you would like to trade places with Mr. Harris and introduce yourself,
Thank you.
We'd be happy to hear your pitch.
Mayor Burton, if I could suggest, I think Matthew Hyland is here from the Oakville Galleries, and we were actually going to do a bit of a joint presentation following the opening presentation that Nancy was doing. So if you allow for that to happen, that may be a more explanatory approach.
I'm the people's servant. I'm just asking who else wanted to pitch. And Mr. Hyland, I gather you're now interested in waiting?
Always.
Very well then. All right, well then, I thank the public for bringing their proposals. And I forgot the name of the TV show where you come and you pitch the investors, but I guess it felt like that. Dragon. I hope we were friendly dragons. So I'll come to Councillor O'Meara in just a second. So the next thing on the agenda is the report from staff, and we'll go there next. Councillor O'Meara,
Yeah, I just had a quick question before, if groups are going to decide to leave. And again, I know you asked the question at the beginning whether we get the presentation first and then the groups pitch. But I'm a little curious just in terms of what I heard in the last soccer breakdown about a 27% group commitment of funding in order to access this agreement. Would that be the same for every group that spoke to us tonight? That they would need to put in an amount of money in order to, as a part of the criteria for this grant?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if they're entering into a partnership with the town, then that could possibly be the case. If they were coming forward requesting the town to move a project up or add a feature, that would probably be the town picking up that.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that all the groups who spoke tonight would need to have money to...
No.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to...
in the fullness of time, when we let them start, they will explain all of that. Councillor Chisholm?
I think in the same lines with respect to, and reading the federal criteria and the technical criteria and the timeframes and how we roll this out and how we prioritize, I think there's going to be a lot of challenges with these projects. So I'll just leave it as that and see where it goes on the process.
Be optimistic.
I shall.
All right, I don't know who to call on, so I'm going to turn to the CAO and let you, Mr. Green, be the master of ceremonies for the staff presentation.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I will ask Nancy to make the overview presentation. That will be followed by remarks from Commissioner Clohessy, and which will be in support with Matthew Hyland.
Yes, Councillor.
I'm just concerned that, I don't know if the audience that's leaving realizes that they haven't heard the criteria.
The criteria are public. They'll be published after this meeting as well, and we're not making any decisions tonight.
I know, but it's kind of like giving your kids the Sears catalog and telling them.
They were clearly informed that if they stay, they could hear the criteria. There's the possibility that they've already read them.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, all we can do is offer. Do you want to go out and herd them back in or something? Councillor Chisholm.
I have the same lines. We've asked for the pitch, and the follow-through on this is what happens if we say, yeah, we have an organization that we're considering. Do we get back to them immediately for them to start working on a business plan?
Councillor, you're not allowed by law to make any decisions tonight.
Then the question has to be, where is the decision made at council under our bylaws?
There will be a council meeting.
Okay.
Next month, as I understand it.
So I'm just looking at time. So November 6th or 5th is the approval of where we're going to move. Just to continue on, Your Worship, it's saying here it has to be submitted by November 20th? Is that 12th? Sorry, 12th, I got it, yes. So I'm trying to figure out how does that get done in that amount of time?
Well, no matter what, you can't do it here.
Correct.
And Mr. Green will illuminate this further for you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mayor Burton. Certainly with respect to all the presenters tonight, and if somebody, comes forward in the next day or two or a week or so, we will engage those groups. So anything that has been brought forward tonight, the final report that comes forward to council will be staff advice on any proposed application. And we'll give an assessment based on our experience, the criteria, and where we think it fits within the overall good for the town. I mean, some of these have a broader application to a broader group of people, some it's fairly narrow. And I think we'll need to give you some advice as to whether or not we think an application can actually make it through the system. One of the things we want to be careful of is not just sending a group of things in and then all of a sudden things that may be important to the town get moved to the side. Or just Because we've had it happen where we've gone in with too many requests and come out with nothing.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to provide a bit of an overview of the program. There was a report on September 23rd that provided some of the information, but I thought it would be helpful to go over some of the criteria tonight just to assist you as you go forward and identify projects that you want considered. So in March of 2018, the Ontario government and the federal government signed an agreement for $11.8 billion in infrastructure funding. So that's sort of the genesis for this whole program under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. So there are 4 streams to the program. There's the transit stream, which you will have a report on the October 22nd council agenda on projects for that. It's a little bit different. They've actually earmarked an amount of money for the town. So we'll be submitting projects based on that, but council will get that report and make a decision next week. The green stream hasn't been released yet. I was told in a presentation a few weeks ago that they thought they would have that out at the end of September, but it hasn't come out yet. The rural and northern stream has already been released and funding has already been released to municipalities. So that's really small municipalities. I think Halton Hills got some money out of that. And then there's the community culture and recreation stream that we're talking about tonight. So the funding split for the program is 40% federal, 33.33% provincial, and 26.67% from the eligible partners. So that partner could be the town, it could be a group that we are partnering with that's bringing to the table their funds and we're providing land, or we're financing it, etc. So the timelines for the project. The province opened up the stream on September the 3rd. The deadlines for applications are November the 12th. The confirmation regarding provincial nomination is estimated right now to be the winter of 2020.
Wow.
On confirmation from the province, when they decide who they're going to nominate, which projects they're nominating to move forward to the federal government, the expectation is that we would hear back from the federal government spring or summer of 2020. That's right now. If there's a change in government, that could change as well, but that's the way they're estimating it at this point in time. So only projects nominated by the province will move forward for consideration by the federal government. So the objective of the stream of funding is to improve access to or the quality of community, cultural, and recreation infrastructure. It is an application-based program. The province has said that they expect high demand for a limited amount of funding. It is one of the smaller streams of the infrastructure funding. Municipalities, public sector, not-for-profit organizations, and First Nations and other Indigenous communities and organizations are eligible. There are some project types that are not eligible for funding, and so they include projects that have a private sector or for-profit element or ultimate recipient, child care facilities, and I've said various because they've listed a whole group of them, standalone schools, etc., but they're not really relevant to us. Religious sites or places of assembly, and professional or semi-professional sports facilities that's primarily a commercial operation. So they gave us the example of a facility that would serve a major junior hockey league as an example of that. There are 2 categories of funding. The first on here is the multi-purpose category. So that is for projects with a cap of $50 million. And I do have in brackets they're flexible because they have said, while they have a $50 million cap, it is flexible and they may consider projects slightly over that number. They didn't really say how much over or anything, they just said that it is flexible. And this funding stream is for new build, construction projects, large-scale renovations. So if you think of our Trafalgar Park Arena, if that was coming up during this, it might have been eligible for funding under this program, or expansions of existing facilities. Under the rehabilitation and renovation category, the individual project cap is $5 million, and that is a hard cap. It's really for renovations and rehabilitations to address functionality, accessibility, small-scale improvements, and they have said that it could also include small new build construction projects of recreation, cultural, community center infrastructure, and they gave us the examples of playing fields, tennis courts, or small community squares. So one of the things to note is that the projects that we put forward have to be completed by March 31st, 2027. So substantial completion has to be achieved by that date. So if we put forward a project $50 million, we have to make sure that it can be done in that time frame, or it's not eligible. And they're taking that quite seriously. When I was at a seminar a couple of weeks ago, one of the municipalities in the smaller stream said they had put forward a project and they wondered why they didn't get it. And she said, your project, we weren't confident you could have it completed in time. And we have strict criteria, we're going through it. If we don't think it can happen, we're not going to put it forward. So they are holding quite fast to that. The projects will be assessed based on their alignment to 4 provincial objectives. It has to meet community and user needs or a service gap. It has to promote good asset management planning, represents good value for money, and it fosters greater accessibility. Each of the objectives has a series of technical criteria that has to be demonstrated, and they'll use that criteria to see how well the project aligns to their objectives. There are 9 technical criteria in total. You have to complete an intake business case for each project that you're submitting. I have looked at the form. They did do a seminar a couple of days ago. They spent 1 hour explaining how to complete the forms for these projects. They're quite complicated. They want quite a bit of supporting documentation. And again, the project deadline for that will be November the 12th. They did give us some examples. So they gave us some examples when you're filling it in. So you have to identify your community needs. So you'll need to look at things like how it impacts or benefits the community. How does it increase the access to services? What are the demographics of the community? What's the group of people that are going to be served? Is it a broader group of people that you'll be serving? How does it fit with your asset management plan? What is the life cycle cost of the facility you're proposing? Will it minimize maintenance costs? So really looking for detailed information. So I won't read this slide. This is a list of the technical criteria that goes against the objectives. When we get to the point of identifying projects, after we've completed the presentation, I'll leave this up on the screen so that you have it there as information. But I do want to highlight the minimum criteria that has to be met. I did put that in the memo that went out yesterday. There has to be a demonstrated organizational capacity to implement the project. There must be a demonstrated ongoing financing to manage the operating pressures without creating operating or capital pressures. Demonstrated ability of cost-shared funding to proceed with the project. Demonstrated project readiness. Operational plan developed and aligned with asset management plans. And I have been told that we will have to update our asset management plan should any of these projects get approved to show that we are setting aside funding to maintain and replace the facility. And demonstrated community need for the proposed project or service. And when they say demonstrated need, it's us saying we believe there's a need and then proving that the community actually agrees that there's a need. So they'll kind of put it on both sides for this. So I just wanted to point out one of the things that they've stressed through all of this is the being careful about pressure on your operating or capital budgets. And I think for us at the town, that's something we really have to consider when we look at which projects we're bringing forward. We're working on our 2020 budget right now. We know that there are significant pressures for 2020 and in the future with even the facilities that we're already committed to building. So we do have to be careful if we're approving projects that we're not going to put more pressure on us. Council's given us a guideline of an inflationary increase or the overall increase, so we will want to watch that because some projects could have a significant operating impact, which then we have to figure out how to juggle within that envelope that we have. In addition to the provincial criteria, there is federal criteria. The eligible recipients, very similar to the provincial. There are some procurement requirements should the federal government approve the project. Depending on the size of the project, there's a climate lens assessment that would have to be completed. And the projects have to meet the federal requirements for the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act. And if applicable, there is a legal duty to consult with or accommodate Indigenous groups. So the process that we're undertaking, as I said, there was a report on council on September the 23rd. Tonight's workshop is really being held to identify projects, not to make decisions on projects that are moving forward, but to identify them. So it was an opportunity to listen to our residents, our community groups, and then for you to identify some projects that you want us to go take away and look at based on the criteria and come back on November 5th with recommendations on the ones that we think would have the best opportunity to be successful as they go forward. So again, no decisions are being made tonight. At the special meeting of council on November 5th, we will bring that report forward. We will literally only have a week after that to get these business phases completed, so there will be quite a bit of work that would need to be done. So I would humbly suggest that we try to limit or narrow the projects that we put forward so that we have the time to really do a good job on the business cases that we're submitting and get all the documentation we need so that we have a good chance of being successful. So some of the projects you might want to consider are projects that are in our capital forecast. So they could include sports fields, new ones, renovating, rehabilitating existing ones, parks. I think it was mentioned tonight, there are parks in our forecast that are out there further. There might be an opportunity to move those up and look for this funding. A lot of those parks in the north, they're growth funded, but then with Bill 108 and the CBC and the changes, it's unknown how much funding there will be going forward, so that you may want to consider some of those projects. Under recreation and culture, it could be new facilities or renovations or rehabilitation of existing facilities. The same with the library or any other town projects. And I'll now turn it over to Deputy CAO Closey.
Mayor, members of council, I wanted to bring to your attention one of the projects that we have at the staff level been certainly looking at, and that would be the renovation of the former Oakville High School, Trafalgar High School, to accommodate use by the Oakville Galleries. So throughout the consultation that we had on the former OTMH lands, we had heard consistently from the community about the importance of having a public use within that historic building on the site. Twice, staff have looked at the potential for a public use within the high school itself. We had consulted with the region, we had consulted on potential medical uses, which had been a desire from the community. We did that consultation mostly through the Lynn group. There was no success in looking at other options, and certainly no town option for the use within the building. We considered those before we had recommended to council the master plan for the OTMH site. Council had approved the master plan, and because there was no use at that time of the high school site for a public purpose, we looked at it as being coordinated as part of the seniors development. So to the rear or to the east portion of that block would be a new seniors building, and associated with that would be the high school site to be used in conjunction with it. So it would become a privately owned facility. Even as council was considering that master plan, we continued to hear a fair amount of concerns from the community about the desire to not only have a public use within the high school building, but also the civic square that sits out in front of it. So we again went back to the region, particularly to see whether or not there were any uses at a senior facility that the region could use of the site. They did look at the entire site and the opportunity to put a seniors building and use the high school as one total development, but given the height limits that are on that site, as well as the cost of the land, they couldn't come up with a viable, feasible option for the site. So there were no options, again, on the public side. We did go out with an expression of interest out to really to test the market, to find out whether or not there was a potential from a private developer to use the entire site, including the high school, for development. We got 4 submissions in from that. Out of those submissions, some of them did recognize that they could use the high school for a use, a center of combination of uses to serve the seniors building that could be built in behind. Some of them also indicated that they had no use for the high school whatsoever. But all of them consistently indicated that it would have an impact on the purchase price given the renovation that would have to take place for the high school site. So staff on that, knowing that we had worked with the Oakville Galleries through the downtown work, had approached them again to see whether or not they were interested in occupying the building so that they could then cover off their uses within it and all the operating costs to go with that. We did a tour of the building, and certainly from the Oakville Galleries, which Matthew is here tonight to speak to, there was a great deal of interest, particularly when you see the inside of the building. The inside of the building is really quite amazing. So they are definitely interested in the site. The Oakville Galleries has been looking for a site for quite some time. I think it's been about 10 years. They're in 2 different locations at this point in time. One of the locations is Gerlach Gardens, which the town would actually see some advantages of them moving out of that facility so that we can get on with some of the state of good repair on that site. We did, and I see the downtown cultural hub on the slide, we did look at the downtown cultural hub and the projects that were part of that master plan that we had worked on to see whether or not there were any opportunities for funding to the downtown cultural hub. The 2 main buildings out of that project were the 2 theaters accommodated on Centennial Square and the post office site, which accommodated the galleries and the library. But the costing of both of those are well over $75 million independently. So that they would, I don't think they'd fit within that flexible range of 50 million at 77. So given that and the timing of completion by 2027, we have ruled out any of the opportunities of funding the downtown cultural hubs through this particular program. So we had undertaken a feasibility, or we have undertaken a feasibility study with the galleries, looking at the high school site, and returning back to the high school site, to see whether or not it was actually even feasible to renovate that building to accommodate a use within it. We looked at 2 scenarios. One scenario was just a straight office building. The other was a scenario where it would meet museum standards, which is the requirement for the galleries. The cost of those were $24 million to bring it up to an office standard and to bring it up to museum standards, which is necessary in order to store any of the collections that the galleries have, was $34 million. So very significant dollars in terms of the renovation of the building. But the renovation of the building and the use by the Oakville Galleries would serve a few benefits for the town. One is we have the opportunity to preserve a heritage building that will, on our own, be very difficult to fund its restoration, and would certainly impact the purchase. If we continue to include it in the private development, would certainly impact our ability to move on that seniors development on the OTMH site. It also allows for that public ownership of the building as well as the civic square in the front, provides a more permanent home to the galleries, and an opportunity to have no ongoing costs within the building itself, as the galleries would be responsible for carrying that on. So protection of a heritage building with no long-term cost to the municipality. Otherwise, at a cost of $24 million, the preservation of the heritage building is quite a significant cost for us to bear, certainly in the near future. So when we look at the criteria that Nancy had presented, we felt that there was some justification to consider this as a proposal. It does, we would assume, meet the community needs. A lot of the facilities, the galleries provide those types of facilities within the 2 centers they have now, at the Central Library and at Gerlach Gardens. So it would fulfill those community needs. We felt it was a good promotion of asset management, just in terms of the protection of the heritage building, and that criteria does deal with some of the land use planning requirements in the future. Protection of heritage resources is one of those requirements. There's some efficiencies with it, with the partnership between the town and the galleries, and certainly it's again, the protection of the building itself. In terms of the good value for money, there are criteria that speak to the organization, its capacity. The Galleries is a long-standing organization that has the capacity, we felt, to take on this type of initiative. And that's why Matthew is here today, because really directly, the galleries needs to speak to the business case and the ability for them to be able to support this type of proposal going into the future. So with that, I was just going to ask Matthew if he could speak to the financial aspects of the galleries.
So thank you, Commissioner Clohessy, and your worship and members of council. Thanks for hearing from us tonight. Further to Commissioner Clohessy's report, I just wanted to speak on behalf of the gallery's board of directors and express our really tremendous enthusiasm about the possibilities embodied by this project. Our board is in undivided agreement that this opportunity would represent a visionary next step for the organization and for the community at large. So the prospect of transforming a once beloved heritage structure and revitalizing it into a vibrant, expansive art museum facility that this community has long deserved is an exciting one, and one we've been really grateful to explore with town staff. So as Commissioner Clohessy mentioned, and as many of you will know well, the Galleries has been exploring options for a new facility for a number of years now, and preparing for the realities attending that. This process has included extensive community consultations, feasibility studies, and comprehensive business planning for operations in an expanded facility. And the project, as Commissioner Clohessy outlined it in the former OTHS facility, is very much in keeping with the outcomes of this feasibility work. So we come to the table with a clear sense of where we're going, why we're going there, and how we can get there. So right off the bat, we note, for example, that we're confident in our ability to pursue this relocation without any additional operating support from the town of Oakville. Our business plan puts operations in a facility of this scale at roughly $1.8 million a year, a target we're on track to hit in the next 5 years entirely through private sector revenue sources. In anticipation of this expansion, the Galleries has recently grown our operating budget from $800,000 a year to $1.4 million a year, entirely from private sector revenues, and we have planned further growth accordingly. Likewise, we feel well positioned to pursue, in dialogue and in partnership with the town, of course, the necessary capital contributions above and beyond the funding stream in discussion tonight, so that 27% gap that needs to be addressed. We have been laying robust groundwork over the past several years for major capital gifts, both in community and corporate contexts, with a number of major donors expressing significant interest in supporting an expansion project for the Galleries such as this. With a plan in place, we look forward to turning those discussions into commitments. It also bears mentioning that community demand for our programming is at an all-time high. So alongside our recent growth in financial capacity, we've also enjoyed a doubling of our engagement numbers over the past several years, with us now reaching more than 35,000 visitors a year, and that's from Oakville, the Greater Toronto Area, and well beyond. Our research and our conversations in the community tell us that this number will continue to grow with the space afforded by a new facility, and this includes not only additional space for exhibitions, but also for school programs, children's programs, and our many community programs, including programs such as those for families, for adults living with disabilities, for youth and psychiatric care, seniors living with dementia, and the many other communities that we engage throughout the year. Aside from the gift of additional space, this facility would also dramatically increase the Gallery's physical accessibility, allow us to meet museum standards, as Commissioner Clohessy mentioned, to permit us to offer more and better cultural opportunity for residents of all ages, and also serve as a significant draw for visitors outside of our community, whom already number about 10,000 a year. As many of you know, Oakville Galleries has long been recognized as one of Canada's top contemporary art museums, and this project would finally equip us with the facility to match, providing this community with a first-class art museum that it can be proud of and the high-quality cultural experiences that it has long merited. While bridging the history of this building with the work of contemporary art and artists is a bold vision, we feel it's one that readily fits within the ethos of Oakville, marrying the texture of our past with the best in our future. We believe this project has the capacity to be tremendously impactful, not only for Oakville Galleries, but for the community at large, enriching the quality of life that Oakvillians enjoy across town and at every walk of life. The nature of this project is a unique and inspiring one that we think sets the stage for significant and broad support from this community, financially and otherwise, and we're ready to hit the ground running to start securing it. So tonight then, Oakville Galleries graciously request council support in adding this project to the list of those under consideration for this funding so that staff might further assess it against the criteria of the program and report back to you next month on its suitability for support. We thank you in advance for your consideration.
Thank you very much. You've generated a few questions. I just note that we're constrained by provincial law from granting your wish of making that decision here tonight. Who's first down there? Ray? Councillor Chisholm, you first.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question with respect to the technical criteria provided by the provincial objectives. It says clearly identifying document service level gaps. With your program, and I'm just going back in history with respect to, because there was always a concern there wasn't not enough public amateur artwork being displayed or exhibited at the galleries in those days. Is this something that has been rethought and that is part of the consideration for your program?
It's something that we're always looking at the galleries, is finding ways to engage regional artists in our programming. So community exhibition space is something that we've considered, but one of the things that we've done more readily in recent years and would hope to expand in a new facility is drawing on the expertise of local artists in delivering educational opportunities and otherwise providing programming to the community.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, Commissioner Bell, maybe you can answer this. With respect to the size, I went to that high school, it's scary inside. No disrespect, but it's scary inside. What's the square footage we're looking at?
The building is about 25,000 square feet, 25, maybe 30,000 square feet. So it's a full 3 stories. It's 2 stories above ground, but the basement is elevated out of the ground, so you know it well. So the basement is actually a usable space.
We used to call it the dungeon. Thank you.
Councillor Giddings, I think you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I called my high school a dungeon as well. Matthew, thanks for coming out. How much additional space would this represent approximately from your current?
Yeah, it would just over double our facility. So right now we're at roughly 12,000 square feet.
So the concern now is, Deputy CEO Closey talked about exhibit quality. Is that one of the concerns with your current locations?
It's certainly a concern. So there's a number of concerns around the amount of space that we have for exhibitions and also to share our permanent collection. So we've been building a permanent collection for and about Oakville for 30 years now, but don't have dedicated space to show it, and we believe residents should have access to it. But more pressingly, what this new facility provides us is increased community space. So of the 35,000 visitors that we're engaging a year, fully half of those are program participants in some of the community programs that I've mentioned, in the kids programs, the family programs, and there's demand for further programming on that front. We just don't currently have the facilities to meet that demand.
Well, you mentioned some of the programming, or some of the programs that you have. Are those programs scalable to more participants or more programs?
Absolutely. So some of them are scalable and some of them would be a matter of we're delivering them in off-site locations. So we're working in partnership with the public library, local retirement homes, adapted living facilities, and delivering a good amount of our programming off-site. Likewise, we lack the capacity to host large school groups right now. So we're doing a good amount of our school programming in schools, which we will continue to do, but there is a robust demand for on-site programming as well. So it would allow us to consolidate our operations.
Out of curiosity, you mentioned that you don't have enough space to exhibit. Where's the art?
So we have been slowly eating into the space at Centennial Square over the years. So the art is stored behind the walls at Centennial Square. Yeah.
Wow. One of the items under the federal criteria, environmental assessment and other applicable agreements between Canada and Indigenous groups, that there's Indigenous consultation, a legal duty to consult and where appropriate to accommodate Indigenous groups. Do you carry much in terms of Indigenous art or exhibitions?
We do. So we have a small Indigenous arts collection, but more importantly, we do a number of ongoing exhibitions with contemporary Indigenous artists. So in fact, next season in the fall, we'll be working with, and that's Indigenous artists both from Canada and around the world. So we're working in partnership with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, for example, on a series of partnership programs for our next cycle.
All right, last question. One of the restrictions is that it's not to place undue pressure on operating budgets of the municipality. Do you see this having Oakville staff, art gallery staff? Just curious in terms of the labor component.
Yeah, so similar to our current operations, we anticipate this facility would be staffed entirely by Oakville Gallery staff, not by Town of Oakville staff.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
Councillor Longo.
Is there an opportunity, and I apologize, I have not been to the Oakville Gallery, but it is on my list to go. Is there an opportunity to
Field trip
to have a cafe, like you have a larger space now, would that be an opportunity to have some type of a cafe which you could draw more visitors in so they can actually make a day of it, similar to what the ROM does, where in the basement they have an eating facility?
Yeah, it's certainly something that we've looked at. So as I mentioned, we did a number of feasibility studies, and we did quite a number of comparative analyses with other Canadian institutions, particularly at this scale. And our conclusions were that in facilities of less than 50,000 square feet, it can be difficult to sustain a cafe operation effectively, but it's certainly something that we'd be open to looking at further moving forward. Yeah.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to, this might be a question for Jane, I'm not sure. Two numbers were thrown around with respect to this cost of this project. I think you had 24 million for office use and 34 for the gallery. Is that both in connection to the gallery, or was one specifically a standalone office?
No,
One wasn't specifically standalone office.
Right.
Just so that we get an understanding of what is the additional.
Just to compare the two.
Value to bring it up to a museum.
So $24 million to establish an office building that people, okay, I just want to be clear, because I somehow had the idea that $24 million to create an office for Matthew.
That's a very nice office.
Yeah, lots of art. The $34 million, is this an all-in, like as in ready to operate and open the doors kind of number, or is this simply to retrofit the building?
So it wouldn't include any of the finishing furniture and those types of things within the building, but it was to renovate the entire building so that it was in a moving condition for the galleries.
So it still require the galleries to have enough funds to actually then operate a gallery. So that brings me to my main question, and with great respect, I do recall that a few years ago, the gallery was on the brink of bankruptcy.
That's right.
How do we go from that to the point of being able to demonstrate some of the financial risk and assessment due diligence? How do we go from there to here? Have you had an epiphany improvement in your finances? What's exactly happened in the last few years?
Meet Matthew.
It's been a transformational period at the galleries over the past 10 years. So you're right, the galleries posted a series of deficits in 2006, 2007, and 2008,
Yep.
and I was hired in 2009. And you'll see that our financial situation has changed considerably. So as I noted, we've grown our operating budget by 75%. At that time, our funding mix was 83% of our funding came from the public sector and 17% came from the private sector. That's now 50-50, and we anticipate in the coming years that it'll be 60% public sector and 40% 60% private sector and 40% public sector. And so that's been entirely about adopting a new business plan and changing our relationship both to the community we serve and to our donors, funders, sponsors, and other stakeholders.
It would be interesting to have a counselor's night out to come and
I would welcome
explore and to learn more about what you've been able to achieve. I assume you've been squirreling away capital money since that time as well?
To date, we have not. We want to be clear about that. So as I said, we've been talking with donors, but in the absence of a concrete plan, this is the first time we're speaking publicly of this. And as many of you know, we were exploring a number of other opportunities through the Downtown Cultural Hub process. We've only been speaking in broad strokes with donors. With the green light on this and the support of the town, we would start sitting down with donors, both corporate and community donors, and start talking about commitments. We have had tentative commitments extended to us in 6- and 7-figure ranges, but again, in the absence of something on paper, we want to be cautious about how we report on those.
Last question. So we heard $34 million to bring the building into a state of repair that it could be utilized for the gallery. What do you anticipate the gallery site cost would be to actually open the doors?
Yeah, so that's something that we would need to look into in the short term.
Thank you.
Of course.
Alrighty, Councillor Chisholm, you're at the end of a long list of first-timers, so settle in. Councillor O'Meara is next.
Thank you, Worship. Matthew, thank you for coming. It's always good to see you. Just 2 quick questions. So would this new facility, and you'll have to help me finish my question here because we've talked about it before, about the level of accreditation that you can get as a museum. Would that take you to the upper echelon level of accreditation?
That's right. So something that's important to note is the feasibility study that Commissioner Clohessy mentioned. That was preceded by an analysis done by a professional conservator who looked at the facility to determine if it could meet what's called Category A designation through Canadian Heritage. That designation allows us to accept gifts of cultural property, namely artworks, for our collection. So I'll note that right now, in an average year, we're turning down anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000 worth of artworks that we would love to see stay in this community. They're going to other communities because our facilities don't meet that criteria right now. And so one of the big drives, aside from serving the community more effectively and having the space to meet programming demands, is to ensure that we can effectively build a collection as a legacy for the people of this community.
Perfect.
So yes, that report from the conservator was what was used by the architect to test to look at costing, for example. So it would meet Category A designation.
Perfect. And then my second question, this may be for staff. What would the impacts and ramifications be of opening this facility in terms of parking in that area?
Well, just adjacent to it is the parking garage, which has about 500 spaces within it, and only a portion of those are required actually for the community center. So there would be sufficient parking within that parking garage to accommodate this use.
Perfect. Thank you, Worship.
Alrighty, Councillor Haslett-Seal.
Matthew, thank you for coming out and thank you for your passion for this project. Just because some folks have not been to the galleries and maybe don't understand some of the great work, can you just give, and you're very humble about how the esteem in which the galleries is held across North America. But when we take it right back down to the resident and their child, can you give people a sense of the number of kids, for example, who have benefited from the galleries?
Sure. So of the 35,000 engagement of visitors and participants that we count in a year, roughly 10,000 of those are children. And we interface with them in a variety of capacities that comes through our school programs. We actually have programs really from cradle to grave. So we run programs for toddlers, for babies from 0 to 18 months with their parents. We run programs for toddlers. We run school programs from K to 12. And then we also run a robust series of extracurricular programs, summer camps, March break camps, after school programs, special needs programs. Anywhere there's an appetite for art or engagement in the community, especially around children, we're committed to fulfilling it.
And so now I shift gears to the hard stuff, which is money. So $34 million. There is I believe a galleries in Calgary that did receive some of this federal grant money. Can you just explain to people what that entailed?
Yeah, sure. So there's an organization in Calgary that's looking to consolidate 3 contemporary art institutions under a banner called Contemporary Calgary, and they're looking to move into the old Calgary Planetarium. So it's another retrofit, and of course Alberta is a bit ahead of the curve in terms of, these decisions have been made in Alberta already. So that planetarium retrofit is part of a larger arts court, and $100 million in funding was just allocated to that arts court through the Alberta government. Joint funding between through the same program in Alberta through a joint funding from the province and the federal government.
So there is a demonstrated example that funding, it could be preferred funding. And I guess my final question for you, what's your confidence level that you've said you can carry the operating costs and can demonstrate that? What's your confidence level in terms of fundraising what could be approximately a $10 million gap?
It's high. So one of the advantages of the downtown cultural hub process being elongated is it's given us a tremendous opportunity to be building capacity and support within the community for major gifts. So we're not caught unawares here. We've been working with major donors to prepare them for an ask on this front for a number of years now.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Councillor Lischina.
Thank you. My question is, I think for Commissioner Pelosi, how much are we spending a year upkeep the building right now with respect to the OT, the high school? Because that would come off our books, I'm assuming, if this wasn't approved.
So there would be a cost to maintain it. I don't have those numbers. I'll have to get you those numbers.
So I guess I'm trying to clarify, so currently the cost, that's my question now, but if this goes to the galleries, then it's no longer owned by the town? Or how does that work?
The concept was that the town would continue to own the building itself. It would be a lease to arrangement to the Oakville galleries, where they would pay for the operation, the normal operation of the building, so heat and hydro and those types of things would be covered through those arrangements.
But all the rest of the stuff, we would still be the ones responsible for the HVAC and all that?
No, the capital cost to renovate the building, to put all those, would be covered off through this grant program and whatever capital funding or that.
Commissioner, she's asking about the asset management plan funding.
Yes, that's where I was just getting to that.
Okay. Quickly.
So there is a requirement for us to maintain regular, the ability to replace the building. And so we would be required to still contribute those amounts either through a partnership with the galleries or through our own funds.
Thank you.
So your worship, as the orchestrator of staff, I'll now turn that over to the Commissioner of Corporate Services to embellish.
So we would, typically what we do is we enter into an agreement where the group contributes to a maintenance reserve. That's what we did with the soccer club for Pine Glen. So there's a formula we work out, and gymnastics, so they would contribute towards the maintenance of the building and the ultimate replacement. So they would provide, as part of their agreement, not only would they pay back the cost of the mortgage per se, but also an annual maintenance contribution as well.
And I'm assuming the Oakville galleries would include the chimney sweeps.
That's right. It's in the report.
Good one. Councillor Chisholm, it's your turn again.
I think I forgot my questions. Okay, it's AHS. What I was really happy to hear, and again, when we get into capitalization of projects like this, it's easy, in my opinion, it's easy sometimes to get the money, then it's a continuous how we got to operate it. And I'm very comfortable with respect to the staff that are not town employees, but your staff. So there's the concern is that the operational costs will continue on throughout the years. So I think that has an advantage. The other question I wanted to ask about, do we have an MOU or an understanding with our with our cultural department or our division or sector within Parks and Open Space in relation to QEPCC and how we program? Is there any relationship there, or is there any conflict? I guess I got to direct that to Commissioner Bell.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we always work very closely with all of our arts and culture partners. One of the things that we really tried to do is not duplicate programming. So we've been working very closely with the galleries around what they deliver versus what we deliver. So we're able to actually provide an extended menu of programming collectively.
That's really important because we're going down this pathway. We don't want to be competing with each other. Thank you.
And if I can just add to that, the question you asked earlier, that situation has also changed considerably since QEPCC opened, is that facility provides a tremendous amount of space for regional artists, and we've also been happy to work with some of those groups to help realize those projects and exhibitions.
Thank you.
Councillor Hilger.
Yeah, just to be clear, so this proposal, we would be putting forward this project for 34 million of the 50 million, correct? And there would never be a chance to get through development charges. This kind of, this is definitely outside the development charges.
Specifically excluded from development charges.
Correct. Whereas going forward, the soccer facility, there is still the potential that could be part of development charges. Or is that
Through you,
gone
Mr.
for
No,
sure?
that's not a town-provided service, so it's not something that we would be collecting development charges for.
So we can never collect development charges for any soccer facility for sports or recreation going forward? Like I'm thinking the community center.
Sorry, through Mr. Chair. So it counts in our inventory, now this is under the current DC, so it's going to all change under a CBC, but the soccer facility counts towards our inventory of services that the town provides.
Right.
Which then allows us to collect, that's your base for then collecting for future. So it does help assist with our development charge collections in that manner.
Okay.
Cultural facilities are specifically excluded, so.
Well, this is why I'm thinking this may be the one to go for, because we have an ability here maybe to get something from the feds and the province, whereas if we don't, we will never have an opportunity to grab some money for something like this. Correct?
The mayor wants to speak.
Councillor, you're correct. I think the information that staff have given you is you're correct. This is the only eligible, this is the only place we could get such money except from ourselves.
Exactly.
However, it is not true that development charges end in December of next year. Development charges are subject to a 10-year rear average. The contribution of development charges to a new soccer building are nil as a result of that formula. So, you know, it's not true that we have a chance through development charges or the successor community benefit charge, which we still haven't seen. It's not true that that would be an alternative source for the soccer building. The soccer building is really, in my view, in the same category as the gallery. These are things that we will only be able to get through this kind of a program or through our own resources. There's no significant development charge contribution. And we knew that going into building Pine Glen 1. We were happy for the small contribution that it would generate, but we never understood it to be a one-for-one kind of deal.
Maybe they'll surprise us with the development charges. We can always hope.
I'm sure that Santa Claus is designing it now.
Thank you.
For the developers.
Anyway, I think it needs to be clear that these two little orphans stand pretty equally in terms of need, and somewhat different in terms of size of money. This is the only difference that I know of, or I intuit at the moment. But I know we can count on our staff to line up these projects, subject them to the evaluation that's required, and give us the residue of what passes through the filter. and then we can vote our preferences. I believe that's November 5th. Anybody have anything any other question or concern? Matthew, Councilor Ramirez, anything more? I was just going to let Matthew sit down.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Ramirez.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question of staff. So we've heard from a lot of needs out here. What is the thinking in terms of what we put forward and how many projects we put forward, or what's some small ones, some big ones, one big? I mean, what's the strategy here that we would be looking for on the 5th?
It's difficult to know how they're going to judge the projects, whether you're better with smaller or larger. There's been no indication at all on that. I think what we need to do is pick a few projects, not too many, that we really think are credible and have a chance, and go forward with those. Maybe 5 at a maximum. I'm picking a number out, but I think you do want to be careful and really focus your attention to doing a really good business case to try and achieve the funding.
And along those lines, would we specifically target, a number for each category of the 2 here, or would we simply just throw it all in there and let the province decide what it wants?
I would suggest you choose the projects based on their merit, and then depending on which category they're in, that's the intake form that we use.
Okay, thank you, Worship.
Ms. Sully, would you please remind us if there's an envelope for the town in this stream?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Would you just remind us what the total amount in this stream for the province of Ontario is?
Including the municipal or partnership fund, it's $1 billion. So that's for the entire province. That includes federal, provincial, and the contribution.
Split amongst 446 municipalities.
So, help me here. Does that mean that it's about $740 million in money that isn't coming out of Oakville?
Probably.
And how far would $740 million go in a province with, I think, what's our population? Is it 13.5 million? Pick a number, somebody.
13.5 cents.
So.
And it's easier to divide.
So there's at most, if we were getting a fair shake, we could expect that $50 million of that might come our way?
Possibly. The other thing to keep in mind...
I have another question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Have we ever gotten a fair shake?
The other thing to keep in mind, and I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but one of the criteria they're going to look at is the affordability within the municipality. So they're going to look at your assessment base, they're going to look at your needs. So that's also going to impact whether we see $54 million or not.
As in, do we look needy? Is that what you intend?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Let's look at this poor council.
It's a double-edged sword. We do a good job.
And to complete my theme, in the transit stream, I believe you said we do have an envelope earmarked for us. Would you just remind us what that envelope size is?
So that envelope, including our share,
Not
is
ours.
not our share, so it'd be about $48 million.
And what is the total there?
Well, the total for us is...
No,
the total
for the
program,
province.
I'm sorry, $20.8 billion.
Right, so everybody who can do the math, I think the first thing you're going to notice is that on a per capita basis, $48 million is way, way, way less than what we would be due. And that's because a whole bunch of LRTs seem to have come off the top. Am I right?
Subways and LRTs.
And subways, yes, thank you. So what I'm saying is, I don't believe that we should set our hopes too high in terms of that theoretical $50 million. I don't believe there's $50 million coming to one of the wealthiest towns in the country when one of the criteria is how needy are you? And they've already demonstrated in transit, which is everybody says is more important, what I would call an amazing bias against us. So, choose carefully. It's gonna be Christmas, but it won't be that good.
Yeah, exactly.
Councillor Adams.
By my calculation, if we were on a per cap basis on this, I think our share might be 10 million.
Our share of which?
Of the federal and provincial piece of the community culture rec.
All right, well then, we agree that it's small.
It's, yeah, I'm just saying, it's not 34 million, it's...
Yeah. So, anyway, let's end on a sobering note that, you know, this isn't a cornucopia, and we're going to have to be lucky to get anything. Councillor Haslund.
I'm not sure which one of you are going to answer this, but I'm sure I heard someone describe earlier that we can ask, and if we line up with the criteria, we may or may not get it. But there isn't a harm in our asking. Other than there's too many. You ask for too much, and like 6 or 8 or 10 of them.
I would agree with the advice that you received a few minutes ago from Ms. Sully that 5 might be a little low. I would suggest to you it's probably somewhere between 5 and 10 projects. I would suggest that you have a few projects that might be $1 million here or $2 million there. I think once you get and you know, you might want to have a spread. And I would respectfully suggest that, and I hear the bit about the need and everything else, but there is a justification. If something catches the province or the Fed's eye, I would think you should have a project that might be 15 or 20 or 25 or 30.
And my other question is, just because we put this forward doesn't necessarily mean we are on the hook to pay the part. So let's just say somebody got, the award was 10 million, not 20 million. We haven't got a commitment to make up that differential just because we supported an application for the grant. Is that correct?
That's right.
Thank you.
I will say, in the case of the galleries project, if you want somebody to blame or someone to praise, you should probably direct that to me. This was my brainchild after the last EOI that we did, and I realized we're on the hook for a heck of a lot of money because of that facility. We've protected it, and I agree with the protection, but if you look at the only way we're going to be able to save that asset, there's not a private sector that's interested in it, and it's going to take us. If you look at what we're trying to do in the downtown, with the cultural hub, you know, that's why we've come up with the Municipal Development Corps. That's why we're going to be using, hopefully, dividends from Oakville Hydro to deal with those other needs. In this case, we've got a heritage building, which at some point in time, something has to happen because it's going to become demolition by neglect. And that's what we say to the private sector who own properties, please don't do that. So I have been waiting with bated breath for the day that the province and feds would announce a cultural grant. They told us about 1.5 years ago, get ready, it's coming. And that's why I authorized, you know, Jane and her group with FCM to look at a condition of the building. I mean, when I went into that building, it's a scary looking building. The birds have had a great time, the raccoons and everybody else. There will have to be a move out in addition to the, you know, we do have to keep chimney swifts going down. Truth of that matter, I was so impressed by the bones of that building, you know, and it's a great asset. And when you talk about what we're spending on it today, it's minimal. We keep it secure. There is no light, you know, it's been vacant how long, Councillor Chisholm?
20 years.
20 years, most of which was owned by the hospital, who did not spend a cent other than to demolish some of the outbuildings. And I just think this would be a missed opportunity not to put it into the mix.
All right.
Don't know when that next one will come along.
All right, Council.
Whether it will make it, that's a good question.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Let's let Mr. Green's remarks be the closing remarks. They're pretty good closing remarks. And if two of you will give me a motion and a second for the confirmatory bylaw. Sorry.
I just...
What have I missed?
I have a question.
Oh, well, I beg your pardon. Councillor Adams.
We're not going to let him have a final word.
Well, our staff have all these boards on the wall here, and I thought we were meant to put into the hopper grocery list of things. Am I missing something?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was the intent. So the intent was to have the community present any requests they have for us to do our presentation, and then to give you the opportunity to identify any projects you want us to take away and look at for consideration as well for that November 5th report.
So we've had a handful of asks from members of the public. Just because a member of the public has come forward may or may not mean that it's a eligible project and that our staff should spend time on it. Is there a view of the 5 or 6 delegations that we've had and which ones are worthy of consideration? Clearly the discussion about
We'll come back with that in the November 5th report. We'll look at each of the 5 that came forward and the pros and cons on how it would line up.
So the gymnastics, the soccer, this one that we talked about a fair bit, the other smaller ones that have come forward, you're going to consider all of that and bring back a report
for November the 5th, and then any projects that you would like to identify tonight that you would like us to also consider.
So anything in addition to what we discussed. Thank you.
Does anybody have a pet project they would like to voice and have reviewed? Councillor Sanju.
I think everybody already knows what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. So obviously the community center up in North Oakville, and then there was one other on your list, Commissioner Sully, the sports park in Oakville as well. Thank you.
Councillor Adams, did you have a project?
Well, I wanted to ask our staff if in the consideration of the project, so staff have listed a bunch of projects in the memo that they provided us. Some of those are, I'll say, largely or 90% growth funded, and some of them are much less so. There might be a tiny component that's growth related, but almost none by comparison. My understanding of this funding is if you apply it to growth funded projects, it replaces the development charge funding in proportion to the size of the project. Is that correct?
Under the current legislation, yes.
So we as a community would be best applying for projects that are largely tax-supported funding as opposed to development charge or community benefit charge in the future.
You would. The only reason you might want to consider growth projects is because we are unsure as to the amount of funding we will get going forward.
So when I looked at the list, the sport field conversion project that you had listed there, which is, I'll say, a medium-sized project. It's more than a couple $1,000s, but it's less than millions. That's an entirely tax-supported set of projects.
That would be. Yes.
Which would be an appropriate kind of project to put forward, I think, in my mind, in terms of, if you're not going to be able to get a $10 million project, then that's the kind of project that...
Okay, thank you.
So what I'm saying is, that ought to be one of the criteria that we're using.
Right. So I'm just going to repeat, I was under the impression that staff have the responsibility to evaluate by all these criteria, including what portion is coming from tax and what from DCs that are real as opposed to unknown. But all these criteria, your job is to evaluate and bring us back on the 5th.
Yeah.
So, does anybody have a project that's not on the list? Councillor Romero?
And I will reference it because my ward councillor isn't here, but she had mentioned some sort of an ice rink, an outdoor public large ice rink that is probably cool because of the temperatures we have. And I think it probably would be an asset somewhere in Oakville. It doesn't have to be specifically in Ward 1, but I think that would be something if there's a possibility to look into that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Adams?
There are a number of smaller infill parquet projects that we've had discussions about that are not on the list and may not be DC eligible. Could we consider those as, if we're looking for a range of big and small, they would be in the smaller end of a type of project that would be considerable.
Anybody else? Councillor Hazlet-Teal, I'm looking at you and wondering if you want a skate park somewhere.
Could you please add a skate park for Ward 3?
Indoor or outdoor?
Outdoor.
Councillor Elgar?
Basketball court at Glen Abbey Rec Center.
Yes.
It'll fit in with the skate park. Anybody else? Councillor Knoll?
This might be a little left field, but a small-scale performing arts center in North Oakville, that would be, go with me here. Something that would be smaller scale for little theater groups and schools and such to be able to use for performances that would not necessarily be able to afford the Performing Arts Center downtown. I'm thinking something along the lines of, in partnership with Sheridan potentially, something along the lines of the Burnhamthorpe Library in Mississauga, the London Library. They all have these smaller scale performing arts centers that are more accessible to community groups. Like I said, a little left field, a little left brain thinking.
Mr. Green?
Very recently, I was approached by Sheridan. In the past, the previous CEO at Sheridan did not see partnering with the town. There has been some interest expressed. One of the questions I will have of them, is this something they're looking at? And I think there is an opportunity, whether it's in the short term or a longer term. I do plan to pursue that.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm aware that the Halton District School Board wants to build a theater at White Oaks. I myself don't support that, but that's the only other capital project that I know of floating around. Councillor Chisholm, do you have a
Well, since we have a Christmas list here, I know it's come up on many occasions, and I'm surprised they're not here tonight, is the Oakville Aquatic Club with respect to a 50-meter pool.
Oh, thank you for that. That hurt. Councillor Sandy.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I just didn't want to talk out of turn, but as a response to Councillor Chisholm, so if I get my community center, you can have your pool.
Oh, we're not going to dive into that. Councillor Elgar has moved the confirmatory bylaw. Is there a seconder? Councillor Longo? Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Longo are moving receipt of the report from the commissioner. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's received. Do I have two volunteers for the confirmatory bylaw? Councillor Lischina and Councillor Adams, thank you very much. All those in favor? And that is confirmed, and I thank you for your time and attention and the airing of everybody's pet rock wish list. We are adjourned. It's been terrific working with you.